Welcome to Conversations About Money. I'm very excited today to introduce somebody who I came across just a couple of weeks ago, almost by chance. She actually invited me to participate in her summit. And so she was interviewing me and she told me this remarkable and fascinating story about her own life before we started the interview. And the minute I heard it, I thought, oh, I want to reverse this. I want to interview her and let her share that story because it made me think about my life differently. And I felt that it could give all of us an opportunity to just stop for a moment and think about our own life in a way that we very, very rarely do. And so I'm delighted to introduce Leah Lovington.
Yeah.
Welcome, Leah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
I think we need to just dive in. I've already primed everybody that there is a story to tell here. So I'd love you to tell the story that gave you the chance to look at your own life differently.
Yeah. Well, I'll just kind of tell the story that I told you when we first started talking. And I was married to an alcoholic for 14 years. And during um, him being an alcoholic and during our marriage, his drinking progressively got worse. And towards the end, he became violent when he would almost get very drunk and blacked out. And during one of his violent rages, he gave me a brain injury. And I woke up and had no memory. So I completely lost my memory. And that was the start of how I had to reinvent myself. And it has been a very challenging, beautiful, interesting journey, learning and implementing a whole new life.
Well, as I said, it's surprising. And just like a tiny bit of background, maybe this caught my attention. When I was 30, my sister had a brain tumor. And after she had an operation, she lost part of her memory. She lost her short-term memory. So she could walk into a room and not know the way out of it again because she couldn't remember where the door was. So it was a very specific experience, but it showed me how our memory forms just literally almost everything that we do. It's such a significant part of our life. And yet, if we live our entire life from memory alone, something doesn't work very well. And I think that's what you show so clearly. So let's start from this place where you find you have no memory, but you have to live. You're here. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about how that was at the beginning for you?
When I woke up in the hospital, it was terrifying. I started to lead by fear because nothing was familiar. I didn't remember anything. And people would come in and they would act like they knew me and I didn't know them. So it started off in this um, fear based, high anxiety. And, I remember on my way home from the hospital, I had lived in Las Vegas, and then my accident was in Texas, and I had been in Texas for, gosh, I think it was about 4 years at that time. So when I was driving home, I thought I was going to my home in Las Vegas, and I had already been in Texas for 4 years. So I had remembered no life, no friends, no nothing of being in Texas, and I remember as I was getting memories back, because I didn't think of myself at first of like, oh, I'm reinventing myself, right? I was very like black and white to me. Oh, I like this. Oh, I don't like this. I remember having all the cabinets open, keeping closet doors open, all the cabinets open, everything open so I could see it, so I knew where everything was because I didn't remember. And so I'm going along life and I would get these memories back and they'd be, huge, sometimes huge downloads. And I remember 15 years of my life. And so for many years, I was doing this, but I had to really learn to get out of that fear and start settling with what was coming at me. Otherwise, it would have just been a life of massive, massive anxiety continuously, you know?
It's
And
interesting, isn't it? Because there's a thought that I had. So you surprised me when you said that about the fear, because I had a thought that you might have woken up in a kind of innocent state where you kind of didn't know anything, but because you didn't have any memories, that there wasn't anything fearful there. So I find that fascinating in itself, that fear
yeah,
was so
well,
present for you.
and it became very fearful because they came at me in a very fearful way. Without my memory, I am immediately tapped into feeling. It was so heightened because that was the only way I could figure out things. And they came at me right away with thousands of questions and questions I couldn't remember. So here, this is tragic accident, and everything was very, fear based. So my um my trying to remember came on very heavily because of all the questions, the questions from the police officers, questions from the nurses, the questions from my kids, all of those things. And they weren't like walking through the daisy questions. They were like, someone very much injured you. What happened? There's abuse. And that always comes across as, fear, or what's wrong, or did I do something wrong? Or, yeah.
So you were probably picking up a lot of their energy as much as anything, and trying to be somebody you couldn't be because you couldn't remember. They were asking you to remember what you couldn't remember.
And they were all scared.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so there are many, many fascinating things that I would love to ask you about, but I'm going to restrain myself from doing that, and I'm going to look at certain parts that I think are most relevant to other people, apart from the just pure human drama of it, which of course is always
Yeah.
fascinating. So the picture I get is little by little you build your skills back. You can drive, you recover from the injury and you start getting some memories back. So then you presumably start to have a concept of, so this is memory, this is from the past, and this is the present. And I don't know what you had about the future. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened as memories started to come back, and what that made you feel and think about you and your identity?
Yeah. It was challenging. As soon as I got, I knew I didn't want to be living in this anxiety and this fear. So I really was trying to like settle my nervous system down. And especially when I would get memories back, because that would heighten it. And, I really realized when I would get memories back that I really lived a life of settling and drifting, just like getting through the day. I was definitely the type of person that let others dictate my life. I did not dictate my life at all. So these were like huge realizations. I was very much like a very lost soul, and I really didn't like myself. So the biggest thing that came to me first was, because like I said, like I had people basically dictating my life, that I really had a choice. That was never a thought in my life before. I never thought, oh gosh, I can really choose this on what I wanted to do, because I lived my life, all the things that were coming back to me and realizing I really lived a life of things that I don't want to do instead of deciding what I wanted to do. I was a people pleaser. I did nothing for myself. So I was realizing that I had no personal identity. It was everybody else's. My career, when I went back to work, I mean, I remember sitting there like on my second day, and I wanted to cry. I couldn't believe I put myself through the misery of this job every day. I was just like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I was 100, no doubt, 100% there only for a paycheck. That was it. Hated my job. My emotions were a roller coaster ride. And I didn't realize any of these things before. I knew I was like kind of unhappy, right? When a memory would come back, I would get this overwhelming feeling of, I was in constant survival mode, overwhelmed, exhausted. everything in my life was unstable. Instead of figuring out how I wanted my emotions to work for me, it was just that constant struggle, instability. So all these things were starting to come to me, and I started to realize, oh my gosh, I have a choice. I don't have to live like that. For the first time in my life, I have a choice. Never even thought of that before, ever.
This is such an important conversation because I think, especially so many women listening to you are going to say, oh my goodness, I have maybe not all of what you had, but so much of it. This
Mm-hmm.
feeling that your life is being lived, other people are somehow at some level controlling it, even if they're not. But
Yeah.
you can't see that. But when you look at it through your eyes, it's like, oh my goodness, what choices. I look back when I was younger, what choices was I really able to make, and how many choices did I really make?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think at this particular time it's very, very important, because if we stay passive like that, other people will make the decisions at every scale of life, and we may not
Yes.
like the decisions,
If
and
you're
so it's a more important conversation than it's ever been.
if you're not making your decisions, I guarantee you 100% someone's making them for you, right? And really the truth is that people rarely find like happiness or fulfillment because they're not making the choices, right? And if they do, it's not balanced at all. I mean, how many times have you heard, "Oh, if you're happy in your career, then but your relationships might not be going very well." I mean, that's kind of a statement everyone makes, but it's very, very true, right? Most of the areas in your life are not balanced. Most people are not happy. They're overwhelmed like I was, exhausted. I was the exact same way. They don't want to think about it. And they're not going to work on it. And they're not going to question it. I didn't question it. I mean, here I am like, oh my God, I have a choice, which we just think that's a natural thing, right? You
Yeah,
know,
and we take it for granted and don't use it. So let's turn our attention to how you started reinventing yourself, because you literally had the opportunity to do that. Where was the most significant place in the early stages of reinventing yourself? Which part of your life did you work on first?
so it was the first thing that really came to me was the first thing I wanted to work on, and it came to me was my ex-husband, my husband at the time, Richard is his name, and what was I going to do, right? Because you don't remember, but you have all these feelings, um, and then because the police wanted to know what happened, and he didn't get arrested because he claimed he wasn't there and I didn't remember. So what can they do? Right. But as my memories came back, which those came back fairly quickly, I was starting to remember everything. So I had to make a decision that way, in that way. And the biggest thing that came to me was, when I got that when I got that memory back and I realized what had really taken place is, what do I want? Because I was living a life of everything I didn't want. I was like, oh yeah, bring it to me. I'll do it. And I had to really decide, what do I want? That was my biggest question. Now I have this choice to create what I really, really want. And what does that look like? And it definitely was not him. And that was my biggest choice that really, really came to me and started my journey of getting very clear about my life in every single category, because I wanted to do the things as I was starting to live life. I was doing all of those things. I didn't have all of the crap around me, and I was doing them, and I was really, really liking it. And I was thinking, and when I would get a memory back and I would be like, oh my gosh, who is that? I don't want to live like that. What do I want? I had to make a choice of what I wanted. That was the biggest thing that came to me. And then I had to really, my next step in figuring out, when I figured out what I wanted, was how do I want that area of my life to feel? And that came very easily because that's pretty much what I was doing on almost everything, was feeling, because I didn't have the memory, and that came to me. It got super heightened, right? So how do I feel in that way? Because I noticed that I was doing like the wishy-wash, back and forth and back and forth, and I had to get really clear on my feelings towards it. So that was another thing that I had to figure out first. And then what I wanted to do on a consistent basis, because I did the wishy-washiness. So those were the first three things that really came to me that I had to figure out, is what do I want, rather than living life of the not wanting.
And so, what were some of the things that you found you really wanted
Um, I really wanted someone that was kind and considerate.
to as a partner?
Yes. That was my biggest thing that kept opening up. And I wanted that all along. And I was doing this in my relationship to try and get it, right?
Are you
So,
trying to make your relationship into that, trying to make your previous partner into a kind and considerate person?
right. Because I was
Yeah.
such a people pleaser, I was very kind and considerate and had this real harsh and mean and aggressive person, right? And I wanted someone to be kind and considerate back to me. So I knew right away that was a person I wanted. Was another
And did
person.
that work?
Yes. And
It was a risky question because
yes,
sometimes people say,
but
no, I haven't found that yet, but I'm
honest
curious.
about it. Yeah, I found that to the extreme, where the next person that I was with was so kind and considerate that I felt like I couldn't even like give in the relationship, because they were just constantly giving and caring and where I felt kind of smothered. So it was
Oh, wow,
great.
that's so amazing. How amazing. We're really talking about manifestation here,
Yeah.
really very raw and pure. And that is for me the same energy as what I talk about, the energy of money. The energy of money is this energy that kind of fulfills our wishes.
Yeah.
And what you're describing there is such a pure example of that.
Well, and it even goes for money. I mean, you've got to want money, because if you don't want money, it's not going to come to you, right? You got to know what you want. That was my biggest step. Yeah. And it went to the other extreme. And I was like, that is really good context, because now I have two extremes and I can easily come into balance with them. Yeah.
Very interesting. So your first thing was relationship, which was trying to kind of probably correct a little bit of the very extreme disbalance that you'd had before. What other parts of your life became really important for you to get clear what you wanted?
Well, this is the big thing that I realized was, when things were starting to come back to me, you don't know what to do. So you get on the internet, right? What you want to learn something or figure something out, right? And four categories, mostly two, but four kept showing up, and they were career and money or finances, health, and relationships are the four ones that come up that are always like, those are the things that you fix in your life, or those are the things that you should fix in your life. And I started to realize there were way more than that I had to work on to balance, like my emotional life or my character. I realized like I had no foundation of my morals or characters, or I had no foundation of how I wanted to parent my kids. It was just like fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing, like maybe this will work, maybe that won't. And that it kind of is like that. But I mean, I didn't even have an inkling of how I wanted to parent my kids. So there were so many things coming to me at one time that I had to kind of walk through them slowly. But I did realize that your life just isn't four categories. Your life is very holistic. I realized that in my social life, that's where I realized that I could literally hear and see people's actions and words. So, for an example, so many people would come to me after my accident in anywhere from a time frame of, 3 or 4 days later to years, 2, 3 years later. And every single person would say, oh, we're really good friends. And in my world, like, I'm like, oh, we're really good friends. That to me, that's like, we're hanging out, we talk, we're in sync, you were rowing, and we're in the same boat, rowing it together. And that was not the case at all. How people loosely say words and don't have the actions behind them was so apparent to me after my accident. Because if we were such really good friends, how am I meeting you 6 months afterwards? If we were really good friends, you would have known about my accident and been at the hospital or visited me shortly after I got home.
This is so true in business as well, isn't it? I see this all. I've learned very painfully, actually, to look at what people do, not what they say, because
Mhm.
we're so loose with our words. But it's
Yeah,
actually what we do that proves our character. In fact, exactly what you were talking about.
yeah. And there were little things like, I'm gonna like kind of say this and it's kind of veer off a little bit, but like men, all my guy friends that I didn't remember would be like, oh, hey, we used to sleep together. And I'd be like, this is like in like a week or two, this is like the third guy that would say this to me. And I remembered shortly afterwards, I remember one of my good friends, Donnie. And I said to Donnie, I go, Donnie, was I like a slut? Was I a major slut? Because all these guys are like, hey, 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 we slept together or whatever. And he laughed and he's like, no, they're joking with you or whatever. But that's just another form of how their words were saying stuff. And I mean, it was so, I was like, oh, so that's not true. And he's like, no, not at all. So people just say stuff that can really actually devastate other people and not even think twice of it. Here I am like, oh my God, I slept with
It's so fascinating,
people
isn't
think
it?
of me, like, yeah. Just
Yeah, and it's so because we're very. I think we've become quite untruthful in our
what?
communication. I found truthfulness to be very important recently, and quite challenging actually. When you start to really think about it, you really have to think about what you say, and it's
Or to
different.
even say, I'm joking. If they were to even say I'm joking after or something that lines up with the words that you're saying, so I know would have helped me a lot. But here I am like, oh my gosh. And none of it's true, but I'm believing it, right? So
But if you look around,
it's like that, where people don't think twice about it because they just, kind of just spew out their words. So I noticed
if
that
you
right
if
away.
you look around at how people live, let's say people who are a bit more conscious, they're into manifestation or they've done some personal development or spiritual development, and you see them all trying to do things which you've really had to learn from a very pure foundation in a way, because you didn't have the baggage and you had to figure it out for yourself because you could actually see what worked. I think for many people in that environment, they can't really see what works anymore because there's so much spin going on in their heads. I'm wondering what are the mistakes that you see people making all the time in that arena about their life?
The biggest one that I see is that they take on way too much. People don't need to take on as much as they take on. The one thing that I learned is that there are very simplistic things in life, because that's what I did when I got my memories in. I was taking on all of that stuff and I didn't need to. I didn't
So
need
can we unpack this a little bit? When you say
that.
taking on too much, are you talking about taking on too much work or taking on too many feelings, taking on too much from the past? I'm really interested
Yeah,
to delve into
all of
this a
it.
bit.
All of it, right? So that's why, like, in my course, I just have four simplistic questions that you answer and it lines up your life, and you don't need any of all the other stuff, right?
You're saying we make things very, very complicated.
Very, very complicated. We take on way more emotion, or we take on friends that we don't need to have that are, not making us happier. We take on relationships that that are not good for us. Like we take on all of this stuff that we don't really need to. And once you actually get very clear on what you want, what you want, what you believe, why you want it, and then implement those, it's very simplistic. It weeds out everything else. And if you don't do that, you get all that. You get all the stuff that I didn't have.
And which you'd had before. That's
Yes.
the overwhelm that you'd experienced before.
Yes. It starts to shut your system down. You get stressed out. You worry. You have anxiety. All of these things. Yeah. That was the biggest thing that I noticed. Was that's why right away I had to say, what do I want? Because anything else outside of that, bye-bye. I know what I
And
want. It's very clear. Why do I need all this other crap that's in there?
did you find that other people couldn't understand that or were critical of you for being so clear? Because it's pretty unusual.
At first, I I I felt like they thought I was being rude because I was right to the point, where I had to learn to kind of like dial it back. Like I had to be more understanding, because I'd be like, why would you do that? Why would you, you know? And I had to listen more, understand more, and then in my mind kind of piece it back and then give, friendly advice. Yeah. Because when you can see it straight, you want them to see it straight.
And you can't unsee it, can you?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it was difficult at first to communicate with people, and it was difficult for them to communicate with me, because you don't you have things in your life that you can relate to. Like if someone passes away, you can relate to what it feels like when someone passes away, or you can relate to their sadness that they have, even if you didn't. Where with me, when I didn't have a memory, people meeting me again, people don't go, okay, I'm going to relate to Leah and I'm going to wake up and not have a memory and then we can relate. Like they don't have that. So they always started exactly where we left off. And I had 1,000 questions in there, like, how do I know you? And how did we become, and all of these things, where they couldn't relate to me because they're going off from the last time that we met, because they didn't know how to relate.
Yeah, of course. So let's come to this piece about feelings, because you were so reliant on feelings to begin with. And what I'm picking up from you is that the way you read feelings, and I suspect rather more than that, probably what I call energy, or you use a subtle sensing system as a
Yeah.
very strong form of guidance in your life. But what have you learned about feelings and the role they really play in our life?
Um, from my point of view, they're everything, everything. And I really heightened that, as I said before. Uh, I could immediately feel like, if I liked you, or if we were people that I didn't like, I could feel like almost if you were, a controlling person or things like that. So I at first was kind of like, like, what is all this? And I had it before, but I didn't really recognize it, right? And now that it's heightened, um, I could get it really spot on. So it kind of scared me at first. It made me feel like I didn't want to like anyone.
Because you were afraid of the feelings that might come with that.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. And then I started to realize, wow, I'm very spot on almost every single time. And the feeling allowed me to guide my relationships with people very, very clearly.
So you're
So
very highly, what we would call highly sensitive, aren't you? And highly
I'm
intuitive.
I'm yes, and I'm empathic.
Yes.
So it
And
was
that's why you ended up in that relationship, actually,
yes,
isn't it?
exactly. And my mother taught me how to do it too, because she was in a very similar relationship, right? So not only did I learn it, it was just DNA'd right into me to go. So um I at first I was scared of my feeling. Then I started to realize that it was spot on every time. So then I started to utilize it and really because I felt like, okay, if I'm wrong, whoop-de-doo. Who cares? Where before, when I would have a feeling, I would be like analyzing it and trying to figure it out and stuff. And more as the more and more went on, I was like, I'm just going to take that in and say yes, like yes. And once I really, really started to do that, is when I like really became spot on about people. It was just natural. I could walk into a room and know cranky crowd, gossipy crowd. I mean, I could feel their energy of where what they were at, and it has guided me so well once I let it in and trusted it. Yeah.
Yes, that's really fascinating. So, in relation to feelings, what do you do now? How do you manage what we think of as negative feelings? So, if something happens to you that you don't like, or somebody is really nasty to you, or something, how do you deal with that side of it?
Um, well, I started out as in this kind of may seem harsh, but I started out as in I don't care. That's what I would say. Because it's not my job to
You
care
were
what,
saying that to them, or you were saying it to yourself? Like,
yeah,
could
like
you
I
did you feel that that feeling was coming from somebody else? Like, I think this is a very
yes,
important part of the conversation. So let's
yes,
see
like
what is going
I
on there.
did not take their feelings on as my own. And that's a big thing for empathics to do. Yeah. And that's one big thing that differentiated the two after my accident was I did not take on their stuff. It was very easy for me to not, I could read it, but I rarely took it on. Yeah. Before, if they were yelling at me, I would get all the anger, all the sadness, all the stuff. And afterwards, it was like, I don't care. You can go throw your fit. You can do this. You can do that. Or what, it didn't affect me as much. And that's so easy to say because people are like, I get super upset. I do all this, and so I had to really really kind of do the opposite. I had to be like, should I feel into that? Should I take that on? Should I not? Because I didn't have that. And that doesn't work. It just made me feel like such a miserable, miserable person. Right. And it's not my job to care what other people think about me. It's my job to care what I think about me.
And so, does that mean you didn't really get upset about anything, or were there things that were happening in your own life, for example, or maybe if you did something, was there anything that made you feel uncomfortable at that time, or negative? Well, just negative in some way.
Um, where it really affected me was with my children and my ex, Richard. And that's where I really had to be like, oh, I care, but not that much. It's where I really learned to take a step back and realize the difference between this is their crap and this is my crap. I deal with my crap, you deal with your crap.
That
Yeah.
must have been a bit of a learning journey for them as well, wasn't it?
Um, not not for Richard because we went separate ways very quickly. But my kids actually loved it. They thought I was a better mom because when they would get upset, then I would get upset and then I would take it out on them because I was upset. Where now I was just letting them be upset and doing their own thing, and then we would talk about it afterwards, or I wouldn't be taking on their stuff. So to them it seemed like I was a nicer mom.
So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And I was a nicer nicer person. I mean, I really did not like the person I was before. Yeah.
Let's talk about money, and work and all of that, or how you approach that career part. As you said, you're one of the four big ones is career, and the other one is money. How did you approach all of that in this reinvention of yourself?
I found out very quickly that I was not doing what I wanted to do, right? I was there for a paycheck. So I had to really line up again what I wanted, right? And then I really had to line up, what I believed, because I believed that you had to work super hard for money. So here I am working, 40, 60 hours a week. And I don't even remember at the time what I was being paid, but it was probably minimum wage.
So that belief about having to work hard to make money, was that something you'd somehow retained or recovered as a memory, or was it just sort of primed into you almost like DNA? Where was that coming from
When
afterwards?
I
Or was
was,
that what you'd believed before?
right. So that was my big shocker because I just thought I was great, after my accident. And I actually felt like I was kind of a teacher, right? And then I go to this job that had nothing to do with it. And I was like, this is horrible. And it made me really realize that I am not doing what I should be doing, what I want to do, what I believed in myself, which is at the time, I was still kind of wishy-washy about what I believed in myself, but I felt like, gosh, I should be teaching something. That's exactly how I felt. So I knew I needed to take steps in that direction. So my belief and what I wanted to do were doing this, and I had to really think, okay, what beliefs are these that are shaping my life that are not like really empowering me, because my career was not empowering, and what are these beliefs that are helping me move forward, or are they helping me move forward, or are they holding me back? And I had all these beliefs of holding me back, where in my career, I'm feeling like I wanted to teach. I had to figure those things out, like, wow, I really like to do this. This empowers me. Or, oh, I can see when I did this step, it feels like it holds me back more. I should shift and do it this way. So it was kind of trial and error for me. But that was one of the biggest things in my career, is really what were my beliefs about it, and what did I actually, believe about myself. So, um, I think that was a two-part question, wasn't it?
Well, no, I mean that's great actually. I don't like asking two-part questions because I can never answer them because I can never remember the other part. But what I'm interested in here is because I meet many women, for example, who come out of a corporate job and then go and reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing for them to do very often because they have so much wiring to be a corporate animal in a way. So I'm curious about how you went about actually starting to do what you wanted to do, and the process of figuring out how to make money doing that, because I'm guessing you came at it with a bit of freshness compared to what most of us do.
And I was at rock bottom. I mean, I had like zero in my bank account, getting a divorce. I mean, like everything that possibly could go wrong, I was at that point. And I really think a lot of people actually kind of have to get to that point in order to be like, okay, now I'm really going to start to do the things that I want to do, because, I can't go any further down the rabbit hole, you know? So I actually had to start to apply actions to all the things that I wanted day by day. And I am a type of person that was like, go big or go home. And I think that's where a lot of people mess up, is they've got like, I'm going to do these 20 things and I'm going to have them all done in 3 months. And and that's how I started out too, where I had to really learn to do little micro steps. And I also had to learn to keep score of myself. So when I say, keep score, is that in that I had to really have a positive attitude and do positive habits, because people have a tendency to be like, oh, I don't really want to do that, right? So I had to shift my mind and make them look more positive. Like, the example that comes to me, and it's not so much in like career, is I had girlfriends and they love to golf. I don't like to golf, but I love hanging out with them, right? So I said to myself, okay, so I want to get better at golfing and I want to do it in a positive manner. So I said to myself, if the ball, and I was a horrible swinger, like I didn't do golf well at all, right? And I would say, if the ball moves forward every time, I won, right? So there were little positive shifts like that I would take and have a good attitude about it, because the bad attitude is not ever going to get you to do those micro alignments, those micro steps, and implement them. So that was a major thing for me, is implementing my steps and shifting my mind in a positive way.
And what I'm hearing is always looking at the results at the same time. What's working, what's not working.
Exactly. And you want to set yourself up to win, right? Where like my big, or, go home, go big or go home, right? Well, I hardly ever won trying to go big right away, right? So granted, you want to give yourself some steps that kind of that take you out of your box, but you want to be able to know that you can win at them too, because winning every time makes you move forward.
And what about this thing you've mentioned many times, that you found yourself being wishy-washy, and I see this a lot, that people, it's kind of like they want to do this, but then they get distracted by this, and then somebody says, oh, you're really good at this, and so they're sort of moving all over. And I wonder how you learn to hold, or if you learn to hold a consistent direction, because that's very important in business.
Yes.
Or if you want to make money, actually, you can't make money in any significant way by being wishy-washy.
Yes. And I noticed that, that was in one of my steps, and it's why do I want it? And because I would notice sometimes in a certain area in my life that I would not want to do it, or it wasn't moving forward, or I was failing at it, right? And I noticed as I was going along, it was because I didn't have a strong enough why. Why you want something is going to determine if you achieve it or not, right? The why is what energizes you. It empowers you to take action. It motivates you to, go towards your vision or your achievements. So
Can you give an example of what you mean by that why? Because a lot of people say, well, you've got to know your why. And they say these words, but I think a lot of people don't really understand what that means. They'll say, oh, well, I want to do this because, and they give an answer to the why question, but it doesn't give them that energy and motivation
right.
that you're talking about.
One that stands out to me right now is I have a client, and he's has the hardest time trying to figure out or dial in his health and fitness category in his life, right? And like he's dialed in how he wants to do his exercises and how he wants to eat and his nutrition and stuff like that. But he finds himself doing this. Like he'll do it for like 2 weeks, he'll drop off, and then he'll do it for like another week and drop off, which is what a lot of people do.
So you're saying he's got the how.
Right.
He's got the
He knows what
how.
he wants. He's got
Yeah.
his beliefs set up. He's got like the action steps he wants to take, but he keeps dying off in it, right? And as we're going through other categories, what's very important to him is his wife, right? And his wife has this huge fear that he is going to pass away before her. And he does not, it bugs him. It really, really, truly in his core bugs him that he does not want that for his wife. Right. And so that made him define his why in his health and fitness category, that kept him strong in doing it. It made him define that he wanted to be super healthy and fit for his wife. for himself and for his wife. So she passes away first and doesn't have to go through that agony. It defined his why, made it very, very clear for him, and kept his health and fitness going straight on from that point forward. So
What a
your
fascinating
why,
example, because you could easily criticize that example, but actually it's what worked for him. And that's what's important.
he defined it very clearly, very, very clearly. And then every single time that he'd feel like he wanted to do this, his why came in, motivated him to get back on there. Like, I mean, it sounds kind of silly. Like, my wife's going before me, but that was hugely important for him. That was his why that motivated him to empower him to take action. Yeah. So if you don't have a clear why you're doing it, why, what determines for you to achieve it, you're gonna fall right off of it.
And it doesn't have to be a world changing why. It doesn't have to be like a very grand why. It needs to really mean something to you. That's what I'm hearing from
Yes.
you.
Yeah. And again, if you can't clearly define the why behind it, it won't, it's very rare that you achieve it. That's why you see so many people fall off or, start an exercise program like the man did and then don't want to finish it. That's what keeps you going. Yeah. It's clearly defining that. And because I started noticing that in not every, but a lot of areas in my life. Like, why am I really dialed in this? And I got this handled. And my why was super clear. I mean, almost to the point where it was stubborn, like
Be
you
useful,
say
can't
something
it?
to me and it was like, dink, no, da, 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 da. Yeah, I was clear on my why and why I was going to achieve it and why I was going to do it. And, yeah. So, and I kept thinking, why is this area so good and this area is not? And it came down to my why.
Let's come to a final question. I'm just looking at the time here, and let's talk about money. You told me some fascinating stories about money. I don't know how much time we don't have that much time, but what have you learned about money from all of this? Because I presume you had to reinvent your relationship with money as well.
Oh, yes, very much so. I noticed when I started implementing these steps on what you want, what you believe, why you want it, and then getting some kind of action plan. Once I was very, very clear on that, it's almost as if the law of attraction just picked it up and ran with me because I'm going through life answering all the questions of law of attracting and a law of attraction, and I'm doing them. So it was super simple once I dialed in, getting very clear on these 4 steps, that it was like an avalanche of abundance was just following me. It was excellent. And it really taught me what money truly meant and what the wealth of it was. And I know that you made a statement last time we talked on, gosh, what was that statement? How money loves you.
Love money, money loves you is the name of my book, even.
It was
Uh,
right. Yeah, it was almost exactly like that. Once I just started applying those actions and doing that, and my mind thinking that way, and I wasn't thinking about money. It's just an attractor field. The way that this is designed, it just is automatically attracting it because you're very clear. And the universe, the first question of the universe is, you have to define what you want.
and the
Otherwise,
money really comes in because it enables so many other things. It's not the money itself, is it? It enables all these other things that you want, which are what you really want.
exactly. It's kind of, and how I explain it to people is that these steps automatically take you into the world of attraction for abundance or whatever you're wanting to achieve because you're defining it, right? And it's what you're thinking about. What you think about, you get, right? So most people get confused because they're like, I need to manifest. They're over here, I need to manifest. I need to manifest. But yet going through these steps automatically is just bringing it in without you thinking, oh, manifestation, 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 right? It's just an automatic progression of what happens. It just, the manifestation just comes over and sticks to you being very clear and defined on what you want in your life because that's all you're thinking about. That's all
And
you're doing.
because you're not manifesting all the things you don't want because you're not thinking about them anymore.
Exactly. You're clearly getting defined on all the things that you want. Where, like I said before, I was living all the things I don't want, and I definitely got all of them. Yeah, I did. I want to live a life of all the things that I want and clearly define that. So they all come to me. So it's kind of just a natural progression without thinking, oh my gosh, I need to manifest, because that really messes a lot of people up.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you teaching this?
I am.
How can people find out more
Um,
about what you do?
so I have a personal mastery system program, and it gets you very crystal clear on your vision and helps you break down a decision making process on how to do it. And I walk you through the 4 steps that I talked about today.
And your categories, yeah? You have all your categories,
Yes,
categories of life.
I have
Yeah.
12 categories, which are your character, your emotional life, your health and fitness, your intellectual life, your spiritual life, and then 3 categories in the relationship, which is your love romantic relationship, your parenting, and your social life. And then we also dial in your career and your finances. And then we have a happiness category, meaning what is the quality of your life and how happy are you living your life. And then we dial all of that up into one big vision, and then you have a decision making process in there, because a lot of people, either don't know what they want, and if they do, they're afraid to get off the hamster wheel because they're afraid they're going to make the wrong decisions. And it's really simplistic once you dial it in. So
Oh,
they can go to my website, which is leahlovington.com, and go to the personal mastery system and check it out.
okay. I'll put the link down below. We could clearly start another hour now and have a whole new conversation, because it is genuinely fascinating. Because of the way you're so open about it, and that creates a space for us to reflect on ourselves and think about our own life and the way we make decisions. So I'm really, really grateful to you simply for sharing so generously, just so openly, your own story and what you've learned from it. I just feel that it's very enlightening for other
Yeah.
people and incredibly valuable. So thank
You're
you
so
very, very
beautiful.
much, Leah.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for having me today.